Welcome to this session to help guide you through completing the fellowship application for the Kent Research Partnership. This session looks at timelines and costings and is aimed at those applying for any of our fellowships. The application for the fellowship requires you to both provide a timeline for your work and detailed costings. In this session we'll begin by looking at timelines before moving on to look at providing costings. What I'll try to do is give you some ideas of what you might want to think about when you're doing these sections of the application form. But of course, this can be followed up with advice specific to your plans from the partnership team. Section 10 of the application form asks you to create a fellowship timeline. This is simply taking what you plan to do in your fellowship, be it training or a research activity, and show us when you will do this. So it may be that training will last for 2 months, and then a literature review for 6 months, with dissemination activities for the final 6 months. We ask that you use a Gantt chart to share your planned activities and when you plan to do them. Here is a blank Gantt chart we provide with the application form, and it allows you to put together a visual representation of your timeline. Probably the easiest way to explain how it works is to show you one that's been completed. So this is a fictitious Gantt chart I put together for an imaginary 12-month fellowship that includes some training and research activities. This fictitious fellowship is going to do some interviews with unknown participants. It's a fairly linear project that leaves dissemination to the end. As you can see in the top row, there's a proposed start and end date. So it's a 12-month project or 12-month fellowship that starts on the 1st of January 2024, ends on the 31st of 12th 2024. And then down the left-hand side, in that far left-hand column, are a number of activities that I feel or I plan to comprise my fellowship that I'm going to do over the 12 months of my fellowship. And to the right of that are columns, each column representing a single month, and where a box is shaded in dark blue, that means during that month I plan to be conducting that activity. So as you can see, I plan to do or have supervisions every other month. So month 1, month 3, month 5 and so on, till the end where I have a couple together. The early part of my fellowship here, I plan to be doing some training and getting ethical approval before in month 3 moving on to recruiting participants, and in month 4 starting to conduct those interviews over 4 months. While I'm conducting my interviews, I plan to do a bit more training, this time on analysis, and then before I finish my interviews, I plan to start doing the analysis that also goes on for 4 months, taking me up to about the end of month 9, where I've hopefully completed all my interviews, completed all my analysis, and I'm free to start putting together my dissemination. In this fellowship, it's a practice article and a conference paper. So the real question is, how long does it take to conduct activities? It's usually easier to estimate how long training might take. Estimating how long research activities can be harder. And this is where you might need advice from our researchers in residence or the mentors from the partnership. At a general level though, you'll need to consider how much time you're dedicating to your fellowship. Working full-time will usually allow you to do things more quickly than working 2 days a week, though some activities are dependent or partly dependent upon others, such as getting ethical approval. And so the amount of time it takes is not down to how much time you have, but how quickly another person or another organisation can do something, in this case process your ethical application. The other piece of general advice I give is that everything takes longer than you think it will, so try to be generous with your timings. But I think this is something you're going to need to get advice on when you're working through your application. So now we're going to move on to costings. So section 11 of the application form asks you to put together a detailed costings for your fellowship. It provides space for you to outline each item you need funded as part of your fellowship. And this second round of fellowships provide funding up to £30,000. Your main cost in the fellowships will almost always be covering your time, covering your salary. In essence, what the fellowships do is buy out your time from your current post for a given amount of time. It covers your time to conduct the different activities you plan to do during the fellowship. So before you do the costings, you need to provide us with details of how much of your time you would like the fellowship to fund. This can be full or part-time over a given period and should be in line with what you plan to do during your fellowship. So for example, if your plan is a training fellowship that has a taught element 1 afternoon a week for 3 months, and you are expected to supplement that with half a day self-study, you might ask for 1 full day a week for 3 months as part of your fellowship funding. How much time you need to do something you might need to discuss with the partnership team. Once you have an idea of how much time you would like the fellowship to fund, you can get a cost for that item. Usually the best way to do this is to approach your HR or finance department, who can tell you how much it will cost to employ you for that given period. Most of the fellowships will also have some kind of training included in the costings. In section 6 of the application form, you would have outlined the specific training you wish the fellowship to fund and the cost of any course. So just take the total and add it to your costings. If you're planning a fellowship with a research component, it's likely that you'll have some public involvement and engagement. The final costings also require you to include these costs. These should have been outlined in section 9. Section 9 asks you to not only think about how you involve people with lived experience, but put together a funding request. So you need to think about how many people you would like to be involved and how much of their time you would need. Again, the partnership team can help you with this and can also find out the current remuneration rates for PPI involvement. You should also consider if the activities you're requiring people with lived experience to be involved in might incur any travel costs for them. So, for example, if you require people with lived experience to come to face-to-face meetings or travel to conduct research or be involved in dissemination, you need to include those travel costs in your cost for PPI. I have put a link to more information on PPI costs at the end of this video. So while your main costs are your salary, training costs and the cost of PPI, there are other costs you might need to consider depending on what activities are involved in your fellowship. The first is travel costs. Do any of the activities included in your fellowship involve you travelling? This could be travel for training events, travel to conduct research such as interviewing people at their own homes or going into services and interviewing people, or travel to events such as conferences or workshops where you might want to present or share your work. The University of Kent prefers staff to use public transport where possible, so costings will be done by looking at the cost of standard travel via bus or train. In some cases though, you may need to use your car, such as if the place you're going is not well connected to public transport, or you need to carry equipment to an event, and members of the partnership team can advise you on rates for travel using cars. If the events you are travelling to require you to be away for longer periods, you might need to think about subsistence, for example lunch. So if you're going away for the day to do a number of interviews, you might want to include subsistence, the cost of buying lunch. There are also potentially other costs involved in conducting research. In some cases, it's appropriate to give people who take part in research, so people who perhaps you're interviewing or involved in focus groups, a gift voucher to thank them for their time. I said this is particularly the case if they are taking part in an interview or a focus group. We often provide a £20 gift voucher for an interview, say it lasting up to about an hour. If you are doing work that involves recording what people say in an interview or a focus group, we usually tend to transcribe this, have it written out so that we can conduct our analysis. This would also need to be costed and included in the costings of your fellowship. And again, members of the partnership can advise you on this. There may also be some costs around dissemination. If you plan to go to events such as workshop or costs, there will be travel costs and subsistence. And in some cases, in fact many cases, there's a charge for attending a conference or an event, and this will need to be included in your final costings. Dissemination may come with other costs. One of the key ones is if you plan to publish a journal article from your work. We've noted in other videos that it's often best to go down the open access route. That means that people can read that article regardless of whether they subscribe to the journal. Going down an open access route often means that the publishers charge you, the person writing the article, for publishing the article. So you may need to include the cost of an open access journal publication in your application. However, it is worth noting that as you're employed by the University of Kent for your fellowship, you will have access to what we call open access agreements that the university has in place with publishers. This allows Kent staff to publish open access articles in certain journals without an additional cost. Again, it is best to explore this with a member of the partnership who is supporting your application. These are the main types of costs you may have to include in Section 11. Of course, each fellowship is unique, so there may be items that you need to fund that I've not spoken about today, and you'd have to make a case for why you need those funded for your fellowship. And finally, I've given you a link here to NIHR guidance on PPI payments. I hope you find it useful. Good luck.